She stood like a small statue in the heat, balanced on her hind legs, front paws pressed together as if in prayer. Not barking, not begging for food, simply asking with eyes that looked like they knew a secret no one else did. He was a retired farmer with a quiet morning ritual and a heavier than usual heart. He expected only silence. Instead, a wordless request led him away from the pump and into a place he never wanted to find. Beneath broken concrete, 3 tiny bodies lay coated in black oil, breathing like whispers. The mother dog watched and then turned back to him as if to say, "I did not beg for myself, I begged for them."
The sight was like a punch to the chest. The puppy's fur gleamed dark and sticky, their small mouths trembling, and the air smelled faintly of chemicals that did not belong to any field he had ever ploughed. For a second, the world narrowed to that abandoned lot, the thin dog and one man who had a jug of water and hands that still remembered how to mend things. He moved without thinking the way some people move when a child cries. Motion comes before a full forms. He set his jug down and worked the pump hard until cold water burst, but the dog did not rush to drink. Instead, she glanced at the flow, then looked back as if guiding him, trotting a few paces and then pausing with the same pleading posture. Harold followed, each step uncovering more of the town's neglect. A collapsed drainage, rusted pipes, weeds clutching broken concrete. When she stopped beside the slab and pressed close to its edge, he knelt and pried it up with shaking fingers, and the weight of what he was about to see made the metal taste cold in his mouth. The puppies were so small they fit into one cupped hand, and they smelled of oil and something sour that made his stomach roll. One gave a soft, ragged whimper. Their eyes were dim with fear and grime, and where there should have been bright curiosity, there was only a fragile, exhausted trust. The mother nudged each one carefully, her nose tracking the black fur as if she could not quite understand what had happened to them either. She let out a tiny sound, not quite a howl, not quite a whine, and in that surrendered noise, Harold felt a thread pull taut in his chest. It was a thread that would not let him walk away. He made a decision the way farmers make decisions about storms. Quick, practical, human. He tore a strip from his own shirt to wipe one pup's eyes. The rag came away rimed with oily black. He filled the jug and used warm water from a kettle. He lit on an old single burner he'd kept in the shed for plant waterings, and for the next hour the abandoned lot held a small, fierce scene of rescue. One by one he washed mud and oil from their bellies and faces, humming old farm songs so his hands would not tremble. The mother watched everything with a concentration that was almost reverence, her body curved around them as if shielding them from a world that had been unkind. When the pup's eyes cleared and they managed a sloppy, grateful drink from a warmed bowl of milk, something in Harold eased. His house had been a quiet place since his wife died. The rooms held her silence like a mantle. Bringing those tiny lives into the old kitchen felt like letting in a small, insistent breeze that shifted the dust. He laid clean towels under the porch and made a nest there, and the little family curled in as if they had always belonged. That night, the sound that filled the house was a chorus of small breaths and soft paws, a music Harold had not known he needed. Over the next days he cleaned them, watched for fevers, and fed them the careful, slow foods a tended puppy requires. He took pictures with his phone, grainy, imperfect, and that is how the rest of the town learned what had happened. A neighbour left a blanket on his porch. Someone else brought puppy formula. A small chain reaction of neighbourliness began in a place that often looked like it had been left behind. When news spread to the local rescue group, they offered to help locate vet care and arranging deeper cleaning for the oil. It was not a dramatic flood of attention, but the steady, neighbourly kind that matters most. People who see a thing and decide to become part of the solution. The mother dog settled into a rhythm that seemed older than hunger or fear. She guarded the pups with an ancient patience. At times when Harold sat on the porch steps, she would come and press her head against his knee as if to say thank you in the only language she had. He would murmur to her the names he had given his wife, tell her small things about the town, the way rain used to break late in August, the way the lake looked before the pipe had been laid. In those moments, Harold felt less like a rescuer and more like someone who'd been handed back a purpose. The house filled with noise and mess and life, and with it, a gentle kind of hope. Cleaning the pups took more than rags and warm milk. 2 of them needed vet attention. One developed a mild respiratory infection from the toxic exposure and required antibiotics and gentle monitoring. Volunteers from the rescue group arranged for deeper cleaning to be done by professionals who could treat chemical contamination properly and ensure none of the pups suffered long-term consequences. In the meantime, Harold learned a new vocabulary: saline rinse, decontamination bath, and soft protein diets. He also learned how resilient small bodies can be when someone refuses to leave them. There were moments of anger too, a hard, steady anger about the pipe that had leaked, about the person or company that had let runoff creep where it should not. Harold went with 2 other neighbours to speak with the small town council. The conversation was slow, full of municipal language and excuses, but it held a seed of accountability. The rescue had become an unlikely lens. People who had ignored the drain before now looked at it and saw that negligence could harm more than just the land. The mother dog's pleading stance was not only an appeal to a man's humanity that morning, it was a signal that something in the system had failed and the town could not pretend otherwise. Weeks passed. The pups put on weight and behaved like puppies, chasing shadows and falling into clumsy naps in the sun. The mother's coat grew a little brighter with steady meals. Harold watched them with a tenderness that was almost astonished. He found himself talking to them, to the mother, to no one and to everyone, the way people do when they want to bind a memory to something living. The house was noisy. The flowers at his wife's grave were watered daily, and sometimes when he closed his eyes, he could feel the soft body of one of the pups curled across his feet. People began to stop by not only to help but to see the small miracle for themselves, and each visitor left with a softer step. When the time came to rehome the puppies, Harold felt the old, complicated tug of letting go. He had become their first safety, their early warmth, the shelter that kept them alive. The rescue group had found good homes, families who would keep them together if possible, or at least people who promised to write and send photos. Saying goodbye was both a relief and a kind of grief, but the mother dog did not cry as people lifted her pups. She only licked them and pressed her head to Harold's hand like a benediction before she allowed herself to be led into the next chapter. On the day the last pup left, Harold sat on his porch and watched the place where the mother had first stood on 2 legs and begged. The spare lot looked the same at first glance, but a few neighbours had cleared the worst of the debris and placed a simple sign asking for proper inspection of drainage. It was small, almost humble, but it felt like movement. The mother dog stayed for a while, then trotted off down the road with a gait that suggested she might wander, but would always return to check. Harold felt something warm and right spread through him. The town had answered, hands had reached out, and the smallest lives had been spared because someone, an ordinary stranger and a mother dog, would not accept helplessness. If this story touched you, take one small step. Check on the animals in your neighborhood, report signs of environmental hazards, or consider supporting a local rescue. Acts of kindness are often modest and messy. A towel, a bowl of warm milk, a neighbor's helping hand, but they change the arc of a life. In the quiet that followed that season, Harold kept the metal jug on the kitchen shelf as if it were a relic. It was a reminder that sometimes a small routine can become the hinge on which something beautiful turns, and that sometimes when a creature asks, what it asks for is not for itself, but for someone else. If you want more stories like this, leave a comment with your thoughts or your own small rescue story. Share this with someone who believes in second chances and consider donating time or supplies to local groups that help animals in need. The world grows kinder one small stubborn act at a time, and a dog that once stood on 2 legs to plead at a pump will keep reminding us how much difference a single person can make.